Breaking news out of Utah, a speedy verdict in the trial of a doctor accused of murdering his beauty queen wife in the bathtub of their suburban family home, all to make room, allegedly, for his young mistress. Just hours after getting the case, the jury came back in the middle of the night with a verdict, guilty. In a moment, we will hear from our chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams, but first, here's ABC's Aditi Roy. Aditi, good morning.
Good morning, Dan. It was a late night for jurors. The verdict was read in the middle of the night. The jury found Martin MacNeill guilty of murder and obstruction of justice after deliberating for 11 hours.
We, the jury, having reviewed the evidence and the testimony in the case, find the defendant as to count 1, murder, guilty.
The shrieks of joy came the instant the guilty verdict was read. Martin MacNeill's daughters sobbing while their father remained expressionless. Afterwards, family members spoke about their years-long crusade to prove Martin MacNeill killed his wife.
We're just so happy he can't hurt anyone else.
For 6 years, we've put everything we have into it, and we can finally take a deep breath and put it behind us.
The 5-man, 3-woman jury found MacNeill guilty of murder and obstruction of justice after 11 hours of deliberation. Jurors sat through 13 days of testimony from more than 6 witnesses during the month-long trial.
Martin MacNeill murdered his wife, Michelle.
MacNeill was convicted of killing his wife, Michelle, by giving her a fatal dose of painkillers and placing her in a tub while she was recovering from plastic surgery. The prosecution says his motive was to continue an affair. MacNeill said he was innocent. His lawyers argued Michelle MacNeill died of a heart disorder. Both sides spoke after the verdict.
Of course, I'm disappointed, but I don't have any comments.
The prosecution put MacNeill's daughters on the stand, as well as 2 fellow inmates of MacNeill, who said the former Utah physician confessed to the murder. The defense maintained there was not enough evidence to convict MacNeill.
That's a real possibility.
Martin MacNeill faces life in prison. He is scheduled to be sentenced on January 7th. Dan?
Aditi, thank you. For more on this, let's bring in our chief legal analyst and co-anchor of Nightline, Dan Abrams, who's been covering this trial from the start. Dan, thanks for being here. We know 11 hours. A lot of people will think that it must have been an open and shut case, but in your view, it's actually not that simple.
Right. First of all, 11 hours, not that quick for this kind of case. 8-person jury, so a little easier to get unanimity among them rather than a 12-person jury. The key question in this case was, are the jurors going to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that she died at his hands? That was it. Meaning the medical examiner said, we can't determine whether this was a murder for sure. Initially, they said it was natural causes. So that was always the problem for prosecutors in this case. Can they definitively prove that this was a murder at all? Seems the jurors believed it was.
Even if they could prove that he wasn't a great guy.
Oh, that's right. Look, even the defense conceded he's not a great guy. I mean, he's an awful guy. And even the defense was coming forward and saying that, admitting that, but saying that doesn't mean that he's a murderer. Of course, it would have been incredibly coincidental that this guy who's having an affair, seemingly over-medicating his wife, etc., somehow, luckily, she happened to have dropped dead at the same time.
Would we have ever gotten to this point without the activism of MacNeill's daughters?
Absolutely not. Remember, the authorities ruled this an accident. They weren't listening. The daughters were coming forward again and again saying, please investigate this more. We are convinced it was our father. No, 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 no. Finally, they got someone to listen. All the pieces started falling into place, and they started learning a lot more about Martin MacNeill, falsifying documents, getting arrested later on for stealing the identity of one of his daughters. I mean, crazy stuff they learned once the daughters got the authorities to look into this.
And finally, very quickly, does he have any shot of appeal here?
Long shot. I mean, yes, he'll appeal. Not a good shot. He's probably going to get a very stiff sentence here. This was his best hope, was here during the trial, not at the appellate level.
Quite a story, and Dan Abrams, always amazing to have your analysis. Thank you very much.
Here,
yeah, over to you.
Some closure for those daughters. Thanks, Dan.